Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for anyone overseas. I'm going to take one quick second here to share my presentation, and we will kick it off. Okay, so according to the United Nations, climate is at the defining issue of our time, and we are at a defining moment. We also live in a world where data is generated at a rate of 2.5 quintillion bytes per day. So much data. But despite all of this data, we're sorely lacking when it comes to fully capturing carbon and other climate-based data. Hi, everyone. My name is Hilary Lovric, and I am the VP of Marketing at Climate Vault, a startup focused on immediately reducing and ultimately removing our clients' carbon footprints. My background is actually in building B2B SaaS companies, specifically in the fintech space. In my previous life, my teams and I leveraged data to help companies reduce operating costs and increase revenue. Last year, I looked out at the world and where I wanted to go next in my career. I just wrapped up my current job and was looking around to see where I wanted to go next. And then I took a look at my 10-year-old daughter and decided that I wanted to spend my time and my experience focusing on making her life better and the world that she is going to inherit better as well. One of the big challenges we see at working at Climate Vault with our clients is that more and more businesses want to get involved and reduce their carbon footprint, but they just don't know where to start. They are being pushed by their customers, their employees, and even their boards. But these same companies don't have the right data to take meaningful action. The problem with climate change is that, for the most part, the data doesn't exist. Think about your organization, how you do business, how many people are involved in designing, developing, and launching your products, and the different technologies and partners that are involved as well. Now think about the carbon generating activities that each person, each activity, and each partner does on a daily basis. To track all of this is no small task. To help illustrate my point, I would like to introduce you all to Sophia. Now, Sophia is a young 30-something developer, probably like several of you in the audience today. And like so many of her peers, she is looking to drive an impact. She cares not just about how she can move her career forward, how she can make more and more money, and how she can leverage the latest tech, but also about protecting the planet and making sustainable decisions. One morning, Sophia gets up, grabs her cup of nitro brew, as she does, and because she's part of the 90% of companies that have mandated their employees back to the office this year, she jumps in her Tesla and heads to work. During her commute, she's listening to her favorite podcast and learns that carbon emissions are at a record high of over 37 billion metric tons per year. It's a lot of carbon. That is approximately the equivalent to 10,000 coal fire powered plants operating for a full year, or nearly 8 billion cars driving for a year. As she looks around the highway that she's currently sitting on with hundreds, if not thousands, of gas-guzzling cars, she shakes her head and is overwhelmed with anxiety. Sophia finally arrives at her office building and rides the elevator up to her floor. She passes the kitchen, the copy room, and even the door to the server room, all humming with electricity. And yes, guys, I know that most companies leverage cloud-based servers solutions, but stick with me. It's part of the story, I promise. So as she reaches her desk, Sophia replays the information she learned from her podcast and begins to wonder, what is my impact and what is my company's impact? Over the next few weeks, Sophia begins to dig into the data. She finds that the primary data available on climate impacting and carbon impacting activities is largely nascent. Sure, she finds heaps of information on macro level data points like total amount of carbon being emitted every year, or the carbon impact of the biggest emitter for her industry, those servers. But she doesn't find the data that would allow her specific company to make meaningful change. So Sophia, being the young go-getter that she is, decides to go find the data herself. She starts with her manager and the head of P&E, and she asks them, how much is our company's carbon footprint and what are we doing about it? The answer is lackluster at best. They have some ideas, they have many, many assumptions, but no answers. And they direct her over to the operations team. Sophia asks the same questions and it gets a bit more information, but is still, the information is still really missing. The information she's able to get is specifically around the square footage of their office space and the amount of electricity used to light and heat that space, but there's really nothing beyond that. From there, she is directed to the finance team and met with very similar results. Sophia finds that although her company has reams and reams of data on the cost impacting activities of every employee, think corporate travel, billable projects, those physical assets you guys are all on right now, there is precisely zero data on the carbon impact of each activity. Through her tour of the different departments, Sophia found that everyone she was talking to was interested in the topic. They even were interested in helping her make a change, but they just didn't know where to start. That night, returning home from work, frustrated and discouraged, Sophia sits down at her TV, she puts on The Day After Tomorrow and enjoys a nice glass of cab and decides that she is actually going to crowdsource this data for her colleagues and hand it herself over to her company so that they can take action. The next day, Sophia creates a Slack channel called Carbon Champions and sends out a questionnaire full of all of these questions to her colleagues. Questions include work habits, equipment usage, and commute information. And sure, the questionnaire is very, very long, but she tells herself it's well worth it and people will participate. Sophia from there waits for the responses to come pouring in, but like most things, people have the best intentions, but very limited time. And because of this, Sophia receives responses from only half of her colleagues. Feeling defeated, Sophia goes back to her day job because without the data, the full set of data, she can't take action. In a world where data is everywhere, why are people like Sophia struggling with capturing climate data? Historically, the types of data points that are easily tracked in the climate space are a very macro level with limited micro insights. When you think of macro data and climate, think electricity consumption, square footage of office space, your heating and cooling bills. But it's the micro data that makes a huge difference once you start adding it up. Think about the power you need to run your laptop while you watch this event, or the carbon emissions you create from traveling between offices. Accessing and understanding this level of data is a major challenge for companies today because it either isn't tracked at all or it's housed in separate systems. Sophia's story, although completely fictional, is typical of the struggles businesses and their employees are facing today. A real-world example of this is Climate Vault's client, TXI. TXI is a boutique strategy and product company that helps build digital products like mobile apps, chatbots, and web applications for their customers. TXI's CEO, Mark Rickmeyer, and delivery lead, Hannah Green, approached Climate Vault last year to help calculate and neutralize their annual emissions, including travel, shipping, waste, energy usage, the whole gamut. However, they also wanted to understand the carbon emissions created by their use of AWS because they realized their overall carbon emissions were not simply limited to their own employees' activities, but extended to their partner technologies as well. Basically, the supply chain, which is key to delivering their products. It was a priority for TXI to understand and estimate the impact of products they were hosting, monitoring, and maintaining. When starting with a conversation with Climate Vault, TXI, just like Sophia's company, had a lack of actionable climate data and didn't fully know its carbon footprint or where to start. So we helped them with the use of machine learning to estimate their carbon footprint. But because TXI has made sustainability a core part of their brand identity, simply being aware of this impact on the environment and their size of carbon emissions was not enough. Mark and Hannah knew they wanted to make a meaningful impact and use the data they now had to make a difference. Through their partnership with us, Climate Vault, TXI not only knows that their carbon footprint is what it is, but that it will be neutralized as well. We do this by leveraging regulated carbon compliance markets to purchase emission allowances on behalf of our clients. You've already heard me mention that I really love data, and this is the mentality across our company. This is the reason we turn to carbon compliance markets, because carbon allowances in the compliance markets are serialized, so they can only be used once, are fully auditable, and are definitively quantifiable. One allowance purchase is equal to 1 metric ton of carbon emissions. By purchasing allowances on behalf of TXI and locking them away in our vault, TXI successfully blocked the equivalent of their total carbon footprint from entering the atmosphere and hurting the planet. The reason TXI is one of my favorite clients is because they realize that their carbon footprint extends beyond their own employees and their employees' actions to their partners. Then they took action with that knowledge. TXI knows that we live in a connected world, and that connection goes past technology to the carbon emissions that we share. So now let's journey back to Sophia and discuss a slightly different outcome. Everything for her is largely the same. Her company still does not have a lot of carbon information. They don't know where to start. So Sophia, again, takes her grassroots approach. But this time, she is armed with the knowledge of how to use the machine learning to close the gap. To help with her build, Sophia researches how others in the space have used machine learning to solve these problems and make climate impacting decisions. The first case study, a real case study that Sophia finds, is the Chesapeake Bay Wetlands Mapping Project and how it leveraged a convolutional neural network model, CNN for short, to analyze and map its 18 trillion gallons of water and 64,000 square miles of area at an accuracy of 94%. This project was created with the goal of leveraging this data to protect and preserve the wetlands. Chesapeake Bay alone harbors over 3,600 species of fish, plants, and animals, and provides jobs and food to millions of people. Naturally, studying an area of this size is quite an undertaking, but researchers were able to do it using AI to process information gathered from aerial images and water flow sensors. This allows them to map the region to better understand how climate change and water pollution affect it, how best to manage that area, and where to leave it alone. Sophia also finds an interesting piece that Microsoft published about how they used machine learning to improve the efficiency of their buildings. Microsoft started by gathering 5 million data points thereabouts per day across the 100+ buildings the company operates in the Pacific Northwest. Microsoft then leveraged weather reports and temperature information from their HVAC systems, monitored occupancy trends by employees' role and department within the different buildings, and used machine learning to identify accurate ramp types for their HVAC systems to bring a floor or building to optimal temperatures. They then leveraged this data to manage their HVAC systems moving forward. Through this process, Microsoft identified some really interesting learnings, such as buildings that house salespeople enjoy intermittent occupancy. I know we're all surprised. But more importantly, they were actually able to reduce their energy consumption by over 20% while improving the comfort of their employees. Using learnings out of both of these examples, Sophia ensures that she cleans the data for her model based on each of her colleagues' roles within the organization to account for the different activities based on their jobs. She also looks at several model types, including the convolutional neural network model used in the Chesapeake Bay example, and the boosted random forest model that she heard was a little bit newer, but still proven. She then gathers the raw data from the 50% of her colleagues that responded, and using Python, she creates a machine learning algorithm to bridge the gap. She gathers and cleans that data, grabs her training and test set following a standard 90-10 split, and creates the model. She adjusts the model a few times and finally gets to the accuracy level she is comfortable with and provides that data to her leadership to take action and neutralizing its carbon footprint. Feeling confident and empowered, Sophia goes back to her day job, knowing she has helped make actual impact, leveraging technology to fill in the gap of her company's climate data and protect the planet by doing so. Stories like Sophia's are not uncommon to Climate Vault or our founders. Launched out of the University of Chicago by Michael Greenstone, a chief economic advisor to the White House administration under the Obama administration, Climate Vault helps companies to immediately reduce their carbon footprint and then ultimately remove it for the long term. When starting out, we knew that the lack of data was an issue for organizations, but we really didn't realize how much of a blocker it would turn out to be. In a relatively new industry, amidst fears of greenwashing and other PR blowback, companies need a verifiable and accurate way to understand and neutralize their carbon footprint. To help bridge this gap, Climate Vault has two approaches. We can either dive deep with an organization, measuring and gathering all the data to calculate their complete carbon footprint, or we leverage machine learning to estimate the footprint for companies who don't have the time or resources, to gather all that detail. For the companies that take the estimate route, Climate Vault takes the reported carbon levels of approximately 4,000 companies who have reported to CDP. Now, CDP, for those who don't know, is a nonprofit who helps companies and cities worldwide disclose their carbon impact. We then leverage that data in a 90-10 split and apply it to approximately 14,500 publicly traded companies in the US. Driven by an AI algorithm, we are then able to accurately establish the carbon footprint of our clients and help them to reduce and ultimately remove it. Because data and verifiability is so key to our approach, once the size of the carbon footprint has been calculated, we then turn to regulated carbon compliance markets to immediately neutralize our clients' carbon footprint, like the AWS footprint and our TXI example earlier. At the core, as Sophia so well knows, climate change is a data issue. So what's the path forward? At the end of the day, we as leaders and business people need to change our mindset and move to a system where we are not just making decisions on financial impacts, but environmental impacts as well. But to make this shift is a huge endeavor that not everyone is on board with yet. Companies, especially tech and software companies, are focusing on making it out of the current economic downturn alive. They're prioritizing cost efficiency and revenue growth, which I get it. It makes a huge amount of sense. And I, for one, am thankful for a solid operating plan that ensures I have a job to go back to tomorrow. But solely focusing on financial impacts is short-sighted and not setting ourselves or our planet up for success. My company, Climate Vault, exists to help companies and people like Sophia gather the data they need to make meaningful action immediately, leveraging AI tech to close the data gap. In a world where climate data is largely nascent, we as leaders need to make gathering that data a priority. Yes, this is going to take some time, but our bridge to action is already available to us with cloud computing, AI, and machine learning. Companies can take meaningful impacts and make meaningful change today ahead of full insights and ensure we are all building a world worth inheriting. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Hillary, for being with us. As I kind of commented in the Slack channel, unless you go look, unless you think about how big some of these organizations are, it's hard to believe like what kind of impact is actually even possible through just the waste that they're not even thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it feels like the stuff is just in my couch cushions, you know. but to them, I mean, that scale makes such a big difference.
Yeah, it's definitely the scale at which companies, even small companies, you know, or startups. We have startups that we talk to that are taking climate action and making it part of their brand ethos, and so they're just starting up because they know it's such an area of impact. So even, you know, the biggest companies out there have a major impact that can be made, but even down to the smallest startup, there's
which is awesome because I do know Mark at TXI, and I'm surprised I hadn't talked to him about this climate initiative. It's a really interesting that even at his scale, you know, TXI is not a giant company like Microsoft. They're not small, but they're not giant, and they feel the need to take that initiative and do something about it. So I appreciate you highlighting kind of the big and the small companies in the presentation. So that was really cool.